What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to Be Transformed, where we talk about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and today we're talking about grabbing hold of the right takeaways. Takeaways are like the lessons learned from reading the Bible, from listening to messages, from experiences in life. And sometimes it's possible to grab hold of things that we should really put back, because the conclusions that we make affect our perspective on life. They affect our priorities and our decisions and therefore our actions. So if our perspectives are based off of incorrect information or from the wrong takeaways, it affects everything we do. So if you look at Moses, right? Moses in the burning bush. God met with Moses and says, hey man, I got this plan. I'm going to send you back to Egypt and you're going to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses is like, what? He's like, bro, what if the elders don't listen? He said, put your hand in your shirt. Moses puts his hand in his shirt, pops it out. Oh, it's leprous. Whoa. He said, put it back, put it back. Oh my gosh. And it's normal, right? He's like, okay, but what if Pharaoh doesn't listen? He's like, no, look, Pharaoh's not going to listen. This is the whole point. He says, but take that staff that's in your hand, put it on the ground. Puts it on the ground. Thing becomes a snake. He said, whoa. He said, pick it up by the tail. Said, okay. Picks it up, becomes a staff again. He's like, all right, but I really don't talk too good, right? And God's like, who makes the mouth and the tongue? So finally Moses is like, can you send somebody else? No. You could look at this story, right? And a takeaway could be, right? Because the story is very relatable. And you could look at the story and be like, it's okay to have doubt. It's okay to argue with God. It's okay to push off and throw away your destiny because of fear and unbelief. And I'm telling you, that's something you want to put back. Right? These stories are here for our benefit. They're for our encouragement and they're for our growth. So a good takeaway would be is if you looked at the story and you could relate to it, but then you looked at the whole story and you saw how what God told Moses he actually did. And you see what Moses' life became because he followed God. See, God said, Moses, this is who you are. Moses, in identity crisis, said, no way. Look, this is a change the way you think kind of moment. This isn't like a, hey, it's okay to walk around in unbelief and lack of faith. That would be the wrong takeaway. We're looking for growth. We're looking for becoming. We're looking for the increase of faith and ability to take action and become who we're created to become. We're looking to trust God, not to sit back in immaturity. If you keep going on, right, you go, Moses has taken the people out of Egypt. Well, before they do, God says, hey, go tell all the Israelites, go to your Egyptian neighbors, ask for clothes, ask for silver, gold, and jewelry, right? They go and they do it, and the Egyptians totally give them all their stuff. In doing so, Israel walks out of Egypt from slavery in freedom and totally in abundance, in the abundance of the Egyptians. All right, so they get going out of Egypt, and then all of a sudden we got the Red Sea and we got the army of the Egyptians. All right, this is a bit of a pickle, right? But nobody panicked. The Red Sea parts in front of everybody's eyes. The people walk through it. The army of the Egyptians tries to go through, crushes them, kills them all, wipes them out. So here's these people. They're on this journey to the promised land. They just came out of slavery. They've seen all these wonders. They've walked through the Red Sea. They've got this epic abundance. And now they're 3 days into their journey, going into the wilderness. And they finally get to a body of water, but it's undrinkable, right? We're talking about, we got old people, we got young people, and everywhere in between. We got cattle, livestock, whatever, right? And here's all these people finally get to a body of water, but can't drink it. So what do? Right? I mean, do you think about everything God did? Do you think about all the things you just experienced and you just seen? Or do you freak out? These guys freaked out. All right, no big deal. God's like, hey, Moses, grab this stick, chuck it in the water. The water automatically becomes sweet. This is so effortless. Just pick up a stick, chuck it in. It's good. All right, no big deal, no big deal. Nobody panic, but let's start learning, right? So a little bit of time goes by and now we got a food shortage, right? And so what do? We could think about all the things that God did. We could think about how God provided for us, or we could freak out, right? And they freaked out and they were thinking about, like, they couldn't remember slavery, but they could remember the pots of meat that they once had. And they're like, man, if we were only back in Egypt, and if God could have only killed us there, because at least we wouldn't have died of starvation. They're just holding on to the past. Every time they get into shortage, they think about where they came from. They overlook the fact that they were slaves, and they grab hold of just, food, water, the basic necessities. So God says, all right, I'm going to rain down manna in the morning and I'm going to bring quail in the evening. All right, solves the problem. But some time passes and we run into a water shortage again. God says, dude, grab your stick, to Moses, grab your stick, hit this giant rock, and out gushes water enough for this massive multitude of people and livestock. Crazy, right? So you could look at these stories and the takeaway, you could take away this idea that it's okay to freak out. It's okay to grumble and complain and to hold on to the past, right? Those would be takeaways that you would want to put back. Because these same people who were working their way to the promised land, because they refused to change the way they think, because they refused to trust in God, because they refused to remember what He did, they would go back to the past. Say, I'd rather be a slave than live in this freedom, because it necessitates too much responsibility, too much trust, too much faith, and I can't do it. Right? So if you could find a lot of relatability in there, but the wrong takeaway would be that that's okay, that it's okay to have no faith, it's okay to have no belief, it's okay to just hold on to the past and just live in this horrible mentality. And that's just couldn't be further from the truth. That's not the lesson, because these people totally disqualified themselves because they refused to change the way they think. So they finally get to the promised land. Moses sends in 12 spies. They go for 40 days, come back, and they're like, dude, everything God said was true. There's literally a river of honey. I mean, this place is legit. But there's one problem. Everything God said was true, but there's one problem. Everything God said was true, but the people are freaking huge. There's no way we could do it. Every time there's a problem, they freak out. They saw the land was good, saw the problem, and said, whoop, we stop at problem. And they totally disqualified themselves from the prize. Right? Like, your perspective on life affects your decisions. It affects how you handle certain situations. And these guys just, they couldn't change the way they think, and therefore they died in the wilderness. So not every takeaway, right? Just because you can relate to something doesn't mean it's okay. It's not about guilt and shame. It's just about grabbing hold of the right takeaway. It's about finding the faith and the trust. Looking at the big picture. It's easy to look at these stories. I mean, you get a person's entire life over a couple chapters, and you can see how God works. Well, that allows you to see the big picture, which allows you to grab hold of faith and to trust that the things that God has for you are coming to pass. The ideas that you have to take action on, you should. Because what God says He means. These are the takeaways. These are the things we want, man. Because I tell you, man, there's this constant theme that God uses broken people. Right? We're like, well, I'm just human, and it's just like God is good, but we suck, and there's this really bad idea, right? It's got this outward appearance of looking like humility, but it's ignorance, promoting deception. And that kind of takeaway, man, will jack you up. Is, well, I'm just a slave to sin. I've got the flesh, and we're just always going to make mistakes, but God is good. Well, let me offer a different perspective. Because when we say we're no good, or there's nothing good in me, but God is good, but we suck, but God is good, but yeah, we're just whatever, but God will use you in spite of you, but God is good. Well, let me put it like this. I like to build things with wood, right? So let's just say we got a craftsman, a woodworker, and he's going to build a table. All right, well, the quality of the table built reflects the skill of the builder. So if the skilled builder, right, he's going to use legit wood, right, like strong, sturdy, like the grain pattern is going to get put together like artistically. It's going to look really sweet. The whole thing's just built solid. It's like you can't even tell where the joints, where one board ends, another begins. It's just the whole thing's just built so legit, so sturdy that you almost like, you look at it and you take a step back and you're just like, whoa. Like you could tell when something's crafted so skillfully. You can tell. You'd be like, there was some thought that went into that. There was some skill. There was like that. Like it just, you stand back and you're just a little bit like, whoa, takes your breath away a little bit. All right, well, the quality of that table is a reflection of the skill of the builder. So in contrast, if you take another table, right, that maybe it's got multiple kinds of wood, the boards are all warped and twisted and cupped, and one leg of the table is longer than the other three, the joints are all spread apart, and it's just like totally wobbly and unstable, and it's a bit unsightly. The quality of the table reflects the person who made it. It seems like humility to be like, hey, we're no good, but God is great. But what we're saying is what he made isn't good enough. And that's a reflection on his ability. Well, there's nothing wrong with his ability. There's just something wrong with that perspective. You see, because people said, well, God takes, he takes and uses broken people. No, what he does is takes broken people, makes them whole, and from wholeness, these people do great exploits. These are the kind of takeaways, man. You want to empty your pockets so that you can fill them up with these kind of takeaways. These are the takeaways that are for us. Because look, man, your perspective can affect what you hear. It can affect what you read. It can affect what you see, right? There's a lot of people who talk about, like most people, I bet, would know this verse, right? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. A lot of people know that one. You can hear that one a lot. But what's the next verse? Do you know what it is? Because it's one that's not talked about too often. Because your perspective, right? You could read the Bible, and this is from experience. You can read the Bible, and it's like the only things that stand out are like the things that talk about sin, the flesh, the world. You're like, oh my gosh, is that me, right? Like that's just like, that's the only thing you see, and you skim over everything else, right? Because that next verse says then, and all are freely justified through Christ. To be justified means that you're declared righteous, which means you walked into a room, Jesus spoke your name and said, you are in right relationship with me. That's legit, right? We're like, oh, I'm a slave to sin, except that it says you are no longer a slave to sin, right? But with incorrect perspectives from incorrect takeaways that were either handed to you and embraced, sometimes you can overlook these truths that speak of freedom, right? Because this idea, this false idea of humility, dude, it's actually tearing down the very thing that people are trying to build up. Because look, man, here's what Jesus said. Well, here's what it says in Isaiah 61, right? It says the people, right? He mends the broken hearts. He released the captives and he sets free the people from darkness. Okay, so these people who have been set free. He's like, these people are oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord to display his splendor. So an oak, right? An oak tree is super dense wood, right? It's a hard wood. It's very strong. So this tree, in its strength, in its beauty, in its big lush leaves and branches, it's like just like this big, massive tree where you stare at it and you just like, shoot. These people who God sets free, these are the things that he planted on purpose. He planted them to be big and be sexy because that displays his splendor. The quality of the build reflects the builder. People are like, oh, I'm just human. Yeah, you know where humans came from? They came from the image and the likeness of God himself. People say, well, there's just nothing good in me. Well, when you become born again and the very Spirit of God comes and lives inside of you, you might want to rethink that. Some of these takeaways, man, we got to, but with some right quick in a hurry, put that junk back. Look, man, Jesus said it like this. He said, you are the light of the world. So you go and let your light so shine before people so that they can see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. He says, as you go and solve problems so skillfully like a master builder, people will see what you do and they'll look at the splendor and it will point them to God. You will never have massive amounts of influence like this verse talks about if you have no self-esteem, if you think you have no self-worth, if you think you're useless and pointless and no good. Which is interesting. Because those God foreknew, he predestined to be conformed into the image of his Son, who was the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Dude, we are meant to be conformed to Jesus. So we're going to have to lose. If you actually want to understand righteousness, understand identity, purpose, and vision, we're going to have to lose this pathetic, weak, no good, useless idea about ourselves. And we're going to have to grab hold, right? Kind of like Moses, right? And we're going to have to grab hold of what he said, or who he said we are, why we are, where we're going, and what we're doing. My good peoples, these are the takeaways. The takeaways that speak of faith, that speak of purpose, that think of massive amounts of action, that you have something in you so glorious and so necessary that the people need it. When they see it, they'll see God for the first time because the people of God who display his splendor finally showed the freak up and actually solve problems. I'm not gonna buy a broken table. We say, hey man, we're all broken and you all suck and you know you're gonna come to God but you're still gonna be broken and suck. It's like, well shoot, what use is that? It's none. There is no use. But that's not what Jesus sells. He sells wholeness, restoration, renewed minds, ability, function. My good peoples, let's step into and grab hold of the correct information, the correct takeaways. Dude, change the way you think. Change your life. Peace! Guys, thanks so much for sticking around. If you're new to Be Transformed, make sure you subscribe and then hit us up at teambetransformed.com where you can find everything you need to live a life that says all day, I keep it cultivated. If you're not sure what that is, make sure you check out the video and then join the movement. Until next time.